Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Alright, that didn't hurt too bad. Well, we're going into the Vivekachudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination, where I think we're on verse, by definition, we're going to be on verse 49, starting in verse 49. We've talked up till now about why it's about it being so important and how to approach the scriptures and why we would want to approach the scriptures. In the beginning, it tells you, how lucky you are to have this opportunity. And it's always good to remember when you sit down to think of the scriptures. There's a couple of things important to remember. One is that you've never read the scriptures before in this moment. So the whole universe is different at this moment. Your mind is different. Your experiences are different. So don't ever sit down and read the scriptures with the idea, I've done this before, because you'll miss a lot of things. You'll assume a lot of things. And a large part of our bondage is due to the fact that we assume so much, that we're not aware, we're not awake. So that's one thing. The second thing is to have a certain reverence toward it. Especially within our tradition, there's been a huge sacrifice made over thousands of years by families and individuals to bring these scriptures to us. This was really brought to light to me by Swami Chidbrahmananda, who is of a Brahmanic family, who's been learning his family's section of the Vedas, been memorizing them since he was 3 years old. And so now he has his entire section of the Vedas that his family is responsible for committed to memory. And I had never really thought about that or become aware of that before, but when I started thinking about the implications of that, the amount of effort for just him to have done that, starting at the age of 3, and for him to have accepted that job, and when I thought that every generation of his family has been doing that for well over 1,000 years, to bring those scriptures to us today, it really changed my attitude when I pulled that book off the shelf and just casually flipped it open. And so when we open the scriptures, we should open them with a certain reverence and a certain appreciation that a lot of effort, a lot of people's lives have gone into dedicating themselves to bringing this information to us. And Millie, you were talking about how helpful it's been here for you and what you've learned, and I was thinking for me also. And that's because of this sacrifice. I wouldn't have figured out any of this stuff on my own. I would have given up in despair quite a few years ago if that was the case. So we should approach the scriptures with that reverence. And then also a great appreciation that this moment, as we've mentioned before, is the sum total of all your desire. And it's brought you to here, to a room where we're about to open scripture, about to study about the truth, the divinity of our soul, of ourself. And we're going to walk out encouraged and hopefully with a certain sense of bliss in that understanding, a certain bit of encouragement, and to appreciate that and to give some holiness to this time together, this reverence, and the intimacy that it suggests that all of us, the sum total of our desires, has put us in this room together at this moment to open the scriptures. And then also to know that the scriptures are never there to tell you about anybody else. The scriptures are there to tell you about you. And that Mother puts them in front of you at this moment to tell you something particular. So it's always good to ruminate on them and to understand that even if you're reading, some scripture that seems really, like in the Old Testament in the Bible, there's these begats, pages and pages and pages of this person begat that person who begat that person. It's a chronology of ancestry. I always used to read that and think, why in the world would this ever be here? You know, but to take something like that and never take it lightly, to always figure out why. Is Mother putting this in front of me right now? What's the value in this? And if you're tenacious about it, something will reveal itself in that moment. So, and to be grateful that you have all of this. Now, in the beginning of the Vivekachudamani, it lays out, you know, be grateful that, one, you're a human being, and two, that you were born a man, you know, which is everybody's favorite scripture to deal with in this day and age. But what he's really saying there is be appreciative of the fact that you've got a life condition that's giving you free time, an opportunity, a scripture, a teacher, a place, you know, the wherewithal and the desire inside to learn these things. Know that, you know, how many thousands of people are in the Raleigh-Durham area and how many people on their free time are searching out any spiritual knowledge. So it's a special thing to come to this place in our life, not in an egoistic sense, but in a karmic sense, you know, that we've coming to a place where we're asking these questions and wanting to know these answers. So the first part of the Vivekachudamani has dealt a lot with that, and then how to be a perfect student. And you know, the perfect student is, I remember talking to Swami, I always mention this because it basically describes an enlightened person. I mean, the perfect student is somebody who has read and understood and memorized the majority of the Vedas, they know the arguments for and against it, they've been living a life of brahmacharya, and they've learned to control their mind, and you know, all this stuff. And I remember the first time I read that in San Francisco, I went to the lunch table of Swami Chidbrahmananda, and I was like, why am I here? I haven't even accomplished like the first half of the first sentence of the first requirement. Why am I here? And he said he's talking about an ideal. He says, because that student, as soon as the teacher leans over and whispers in his ear, thou art that, he'll have his enlightenment. There's no obstacles remaining. You know, so that's the perfect student, who only has to be told once, thou art that. And so we have to strive to become the perfect student, so that one time that somebody whispers in our ear, thou art that, the whole menagerie of our ignorance collapses, and we have that realization of our identity with God. So that's what we've been dealing with. And today our student is going to come with a wonderful question. He says, condescend to listen, O Master, to the question I am putting to you. I shall be gratified to hear a reply to the same from your lips. What is bondage? How has it come? How does it continue to exist? How is one freed from it? What is this non-self? And who is the Supreme Self? And how can one discriminate between them? Do tell me about all of these. So good questions. Who is this self? The Guru replied, blessed art thou. Thou hast achieved your life's end and hast sanctified your family, that you wish to attain Brahmanhood by getting free from the bondage of ignorance. So we start off with a blessing to ourselves. You're blessed. Give yourself credit. No, yeah, give yourself credit. Don't get too egotistical, or you'll paddle the wrong direction. But at least be glad that grace has brought you here, and grace has opened these questions inside, and that you have an opportunity now. You are blessed to be here, and it is a wise thing to be here. And you could be anywhere, and you've chosen this. So honor yourself for that. Take some strength in that. Be glad in that, he's saying. That you've blessed not only yourself, but you've blessed your family. And ultimately you'll bless the society that you live in. Because through this inquiry, you will become the best, purest giver, the purest lover of humanity, of people and things, places, without attachment. So there'll be no end to your blessing to the world in this endeavor. Vivekananda says that one man meditating, coming to his realization on a mountaintop, is worth legions of people doing service with an ego. So give value. The Father has got his sons and others to free him from debt, but he has got none but himself to remove his bondage. So this is yours. That's a very important task. You know, this coming to a temple or taking classes or reading these things or beginning a practice, they're not for anyone else. You know, nobody else's business. So it's not because somebody's going to look at you this way or think this of you, or not that you're going to, you know, make your parents happy, or that you're going to bless the world, or none of those. This is for you. That's it. You know, for you to undo this bondage, it's yours. And this place is here by the grace of God to give us all a place to do that, a place to come and meet with other people who are interested in doing that, a place to keep scriptures to access, a place to provide a space that's quiet and apart. And so this is for us to do. Ultimately, Swami Vivekananda gives a very difficult teaching. He says, in the end, you realize it was only you. Your bondage, your struggle, your ignorance, all of it was yours. You did it all. We had a class in DC on Thursday about the teachings of Holy Mother. And, you know, one of the questions was, why? Why is it so difficult for us to make spiritual progress? And we talked about it, and it really comes to light through the scriptures and through some meditation, that it's difficult because you like it. You like your bondage. You know, you're not so unhappy being what you are and enjoying it, you know, your family, your food, your home, your apartment, your free time, your job, whatever it is. You know, that Vivekananda clearly says, Thakur clearly says, Jesus clearly says, Buddha clearly says, you know, that you can let go of this moment and be free. But we don't, because we don't want to. It's not that it's difficult, we don't want to. Ramakrishna says it's very easy to wake somebody up who's sleeping. It's very difficult to wake somebody up who's pretending to sleep. And that's our lot. So think about that. You know, Thakur says renounce anything that changes. Let go of it. That's not hard to do. It's just a matter of doing it. What's hard is wanting to do it. What's hard is having enough courage to do it. Faith is everything, Thakur says. So know that, and take that responsibility. This is your task. It's only yourself that has to face these truths. And it's all right to face these truths. It's a healthy thing to say, wow, I'm not knowing because I don't want to know to that extent. But I ultimately, I do want to fix that problem. And then you can begin. But it has to be at that level of honesty. You have to understand that you're not doing this for God, not because you have to do it, not because you're going to burn in hell if you don't do it, none of those things. This is for your own benefit, for your own self, according to your own desire. Thakur says that in this world, you know, as long as the child is happily playing with his toys, the mother lets the child play. It's not until the child throws down his toys and cries out that mother comes running to see what he needs. And so know that, as long as you're content in this life, be content in this life. Play with your toys. Mother doesn't come. Realization won't happen. It's not until you lay it down and cry out for that with an inner voice that mother comes running at that point to see what she can do. Trouble such as that caused by a load on the head can be removed by others, but none but one's own self can put a stop to the pain which is caused by hunger and the like. The patient who takes the proper diet and medicine is alone seen to recover completely, not through work done by others. The true nature of things is to be known personally, through the eye of clear illumination, and not through a sage. What the moon exactly is to be known with one's own eyes. Can others make him know it? Who but one's own self can get rid of the bondage caused by the fetters of ignorance, the fetters of desire, the fetters of action, and the like? Aye, even in 100 crore of cycles, neither by yoga, nor by Shankya, nor by work, nor by learning, but by the realization of one's identity with Brahman is liberation possible, and by no other means. That's a very important point. What's he getting at in that? The notion.
You have to call upon the divinity within the self to realize the divinity. There's nothing else that, no action of this body or this mind has any possibility. You have to actually directly use that divinity, the divine. I think I heard one time Swami say something, maybe you said it, that it's through God's eyes that we're able to see God. It's with the eyes that God uses to see us that we're able to see God. It's not through this body's eyes.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is. It's all of Vedanta is included in this little statement right here. There's a lot to understand in it, because it's said that realization is the only effect that has no cause. Why is that? It's because it's a realization of what? What is? What you already are. There's no accomplishment. There's nothing built. It's not a composition. You know, Vivekachudamani says everything that's composed must decompose. Everything that's the result of something must ultimately be undone. So this realization, this task of realizing God, happens by grace alone. It is not the result of works. It's not something that Vivekachudamani very clearly says, it's not like something you go buy in the market. You go meditate for 60 hours, you're not going to get paid for it. It's for the joy of the work itself that all these things are done. Which is very important, because if we don't understand that, then our very spiritual practice can become an obstacle. You become someone who's meditating 80 hours a week. Well, good for you. If that's making you proud, thinking I'm a spiritual person, I meditate so much, I meditate more than that person. Who's that person to correct me? I do more practice than they do. If your practice becomes a source of ego, that is a very difficult and very dangerous predicament, because the very tools that are supposed to be setting you free are binding you. So it's very important that to understand that your spiritual practice is not for a result. It's not to get something. It's the practice of being what you are. That you do your practice for the joy of the practice itself. You meditate for the joy of the possibility of the beloved manifesting. Or the joy of sitting there trying to realize that he has manifested. That bliss that's available in that. That your practice is for its own sake. It is its own benefit. The love that you're touching is its own reward. The possibility is its own reward. So we sit in that space and we enjoy that space, and we wait for the beloved to manifest. In every tradition, at least every tradition that I've looked at so far, which is only like 3 or 4 of the big ones, but in all of them, that final step is grace alone. None of them says that you get there by what you do. None of them lets you off the hook by doing nothing, except some modern day Christian stuff, which nobody's realized God with that yet, so I wouldn't trust it. But that notion, you know, in the end, it's God alone. And I like to talk about St. John of the Cross, because he has this notion of creating his bridal chamber in the heart, And so all of his work to purify his life, to purificate his life and to clean his mind and to control his body, to control his thoughts and to renounce his senses. All of that, he says, is to fix this room, to decorate this room for the night his beloved comes for consummation. You know, when God comes to the heart to merge you into that unity, that bliss, that all of his practice is just preparing that room so that it's beautiful for his beloved when the beloved comes. So that's the notion behind our practice. That's why we're doing all of these things, not to earn anything, but out of a love we already have for God, for the divine, for a love that we're polishing and cleaning and working on and developing, so that when that moment comes, that Mother comes to pick you up, to give you that ultimate hug, that ultimate love, that you've decorated that room so beautifully for her, that it spells out the real love that you've been longing for her with, that divinity. That's what our practice is, that's what our meditation is, that's what our karma yoga is. For its own sake, not for an earning sake, not for a getting, not for a searching. Vedanta, last time I was down, we read that scripture where he says, do you not understand? It is your search for happiness itself that keeps you from being happy. This is an uncovering. That's another way it's talked about. This is, your realization is a removal and not an accomplishment. It's taking away the notions of what God is, so that what God really is can be self-evident, can shine through. And nobody can do this but you. The beauty of a guitar's form and the skill of playing on its chords serve merely to please a few persons. They do not suffice to confer sovereignty. So it's insufficient. He's taking it even further. You know, that even this mastering of your life, even if the song of the soul is beautiful, as a manifested form, it's still limited. You know, it's still stuck within the confines of identity. It's not. It will never be enough for sovereignty. You know, to be a universal thing. And so any work done by what Vivekachudamani says is this collection of restrictions and limitations, which is your personality. Any work done by that will never be enough to earn the reward, if it was a reward, would never be enough. But that's one reason that all the sages say that it's grace alone. Not because everything's worthless in its effort, not because it's all vain, but because no matter how much you work, no matter how intense you do your practice, when that realization comes, you will realize how nothing that work was in relationship to what was given, in relationship to what was realized. That final touch, that final realization will be of such a fine quality, such a beautiful, 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 beautiful being, that you'll realize there was nothing on the finite world that could have been accumulated to pay for it. That there was nothing. So that's his notion here. Loud speech consisting of a shower of words, the skill in expounding the scriptures, and likewise erudition, these merely bring on a little personal enjoyment to the scholar, but are no good for liberation. It's true. It's true. Now the ideas can touch things inside, but again, if they touch you inside, it's because Mother's already uncovered that for you. So we come here again for these, we do these things not because there's great value in them, not because, I mean there is, all of the things Vedanta is terrible to talk about. You know, you're chasing your tail all the time. But it's not for the value of the thing here. Like, you don't get it by coming and listening to some Joe like myself talk from scripture or lay these things out. I don't get anything, you know, putting these things together and talking about these things. It doesn't come from that. We do this for its own sake, because it's wonderful, because it's beautiful, because it's delightful in and of itself. And ultimately, we're hoping that we are able to see this in everything at all times. You know, we've talked about that many times. This world is doing nothing but singing scripture at all moments, to those who have ears to hear, to those who have eyes to see. This world is doing nothing but singing the name of God. So we're coming here to practice, you know, coming here to kind of, oh boy, yes, beautiful. To hear these things and then to see them reflected in the world around. To clean our lens just a little bit of that. The study of Scripture is useless so long as the highest truth is unknown, and is equally useless when the highest truth has already been known. So what's the variation on that? Thakur says, he says, without devotion it's useless to go to places of pilgrimage, and with devotion it's useless to go to places of pilgrimage. You know, so one cancels out the other. So here he's saying the same thing. You know, that really without knowing the truth, what's the point of this? Don't ever think that the scriptures, because you can get caught up in this. You can think that by knowing something that you become something. I mean, how many study sessions have I gone to on Vedanta? There's always somebody there who's, what they know is got to be told, or got to be said out loud. And you can do that. You can study the scriptures and become a spiritual biologist, learning about all the koshas and the relationships of the gunas and the vrittis and the, you know, you can know all of the words and know all of the relationships and correct everybody constantly about their misnomers in those areas. But for what? You know, he's saying this is worthless, empty. If the truth is unknown, if the point isn't there, and what is the point? The point is loving. Loving God in all things, loving each other without ego, without reserve, being fully vulnerable because we're fearless in the notion that God alone exists, is everywhere present and always perfect. That's the end of the scriptures. And without that love being the fruit and the center and the point and the fulfillment and the experience of these things, nothing. No value. No value. Apostle Paul says, you know, that if you can chant in the tongues of angels and you can recite the scriptures from memory, but you don't have love, he said you're just a noisy gong. There's no sense to your noise at all if love is not the fruit, the purpose, the motivation, and the experience of these things. The scriptures, consisting of many words, are a dense forest which merely causes the mind to ramble. Hence, men of wisdom should earnestly set about knowing the true nature of the self. So you've got to make that some action in it. Don't just study the scriptures, make the notes, understand it intellectually. You've got to set about the work. You've got to get out there and start discriminating. It's got to follow you out the door after you close the book. And you never stop discriminating. Thakur says all day long, ask what is the nature of these things. Who is it that's unchanging? What does it mean? What is this that God is everywhere present and always perfect? How is that possible? How is it that everything is motivated by love? How is that possible in this world being the manifestation of that? How can that be? Because it's not easy to see it that way, for sure. You know. But ponder it, push it, ask it, and don't forget that you are that unchanging self. always walk around reminding yourself, I'm the witness. I'm the witness. I'm not the doer. God alone is the doer. And let that learning begin from that. So it's not worthwhile to count off your number of japa that you've done, to chalk it off in your board, if love wasn't the key component to that. It's of no value to memorize your scriptures and to get all of your Sanskrit grammar properly in order if love isn't behind and in front of that. And it's no good if you're just doing it. You know, no value is lost, Mother says. You get something. If you get thrown in the Ganga or you jump in the Ganga, she says, you get wet either way. So everything has a value. So none of these are to let you off the hook. None of these are to say, oh, don't study, don't do the scripture. All these are saying is be awake when you do these things. Be conscious when you do these things. Don't let them become ordinary. Don't let them become mundane. Constantly work to see them fresh and new and full. Don't let these things fall to the ordinary. For one who has been bitten by the serpent of ignorance, the only remedy is the knowledge of Brahman. Of what avail are the Vedas and other scriptures, mantras, and medicines to such a one? A disease does not leave off if one simply utters the name of the medicine without taking it. Similarly, without direct realization, one cannot be liberated by the mere utterance of the word Brahman. That's it. Hearing these things is the medicine, the name of the medicine. To be told that you are that is the name of the medicine. Now going home, constantly pondering that, constantly renouncing and discriminating. Those are the two actions that are most helpful. They seem hard to us, you know. One time somebody said there was a Western sadhu in India, and someone went up to him and said to him, an old man went up to him and was told that the young Westerner was a brahmachari. And that old man fell down on the floor, weeping, taking the dust of the brahmachari's feet. And the Swami, who had introduced the two of them, pulled the old man up in his hands and said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? He's a brahmachari." And the old man said, "See, he comes from a land where he has everything, and he has renounced it all. He says, I've grown up in the midst of poverty and still cannot renounce even that." And the brahmachari looked at him and said to him, he said, "Look, if you realize that a teaspoon of sand is not good to eat, what is it whether you renounce that one teaspoonful or you renounce an entire beach? It's nothing. It's not a matter of how much you renounce. That's not the point. Understand that this is not nourishing, this is not helpful. And then to renounce 1 teaspoon or a whole beach makes no difference, because you understand the nature of it. So renunciation isn't by amount, it's by education. By learning to see that the things that you're addicted to in this life, the things that you're attached to, renunciation is not about giving up good things. It's not about giving up pleasurable things. It's about giving up things that are not pleasurable in their sum total. You know, by looking at them and understanding what the real effect is on your life and realizing, not giving me what I want, not helping me be what I want to be, and walking away from it. Thakur had such a mind that he just had to experience it once, then he could walk away from it. You know, that time he wanted to try on that chutter, smoke from a silver hubble bubble. He had such charming ways of doing it. He only had to do that once, you know. He put that fancy shawl on and walked around in it, and then suddenly felt that pride of an ego of walking around in a beautiful shawl. And as soon as he felt that, he rips it off, he throws it on the ground, he's stomping up and down on it, and he wants to set it on fire, you know. And Mathur Babu comes out, who's the one who gave it to him, is running over and rescues the shawl from him. No, Maharaj, what are you doing? What are you doing? But Ramakrishna says, I saw it was only rajas that it could give me, that it could only give me pride. That was the fruit of a beautiful shawl. And it was good for nothing but trampling underfoot to him. The silver hubble bubble the same. He one time made Mathur Babu fill a room with sweets. And he went and locked himself in that room all day and just ate as many sweets as he wanted, and came out sick as a dog and never touched them again from that perspective. He said, see, I understand the fruit of it is sickness. That if you eat as much as you want, you're sick. So he renounced them. So he only had to do things once like that. We're a little bit more, our disease is a little bit more chronic, Thakur says, and so we keep forgetting. I'm like, let's see, that relationship didn't work. Maybe it was another person that I need, or maybe it's I need, look at Elizabeth Taylor. Sorry, Elizabeth, to pick on you in this video. But you have one husband, doesn't work. You go get another husband, doesn't work. Go get another husband, doesn't work. 8 times, and she's still looking for a husband. Learn the lessons. Joy and fulfillment do not lay in relationships. Don't make the illness chronic. When you understand on your Friday night that you went out and got drunk beyond words, and you woke up the next morning swearing you were never going to do this again, the next time you're getting dressed to go out and do it again on the following Friday night, remember those words. Remember that Saturday morning when you said, oh God, I'm never going to do that again. Because that's part of the action that has to be taken into account. Things in this world are only pleasurable when you put boundaries, a narrow boundary on them. The pleasurable part from this moment to this moment, oh, that was great. But when you broaden those boundaries out, look at the full picture, from the beginning of that action to the end, beyond that action. What did it leave you? What did it give you? Those things lead to renunciation. If you're bitten by the serpent of ignorance, you keep returning to those things. And what famous person, I don't know who it is, he says the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing expecting different results. So we've got to stop doing that. We've got to stop doing that. We can't, if we want change in our life, we can't just keep living the same life. If you want tomorrow to be different from today, then today has to be lived differently than yesterday. So make those decisions. If you want realization, do things that are beneficial to realization today, and you move closer to that way, that direction for tomorrow. Don't challenge me on this. Because I know that it doesn't make any sense when you say that it has no effect or the causes. That realization is the one effect with no cause. All of that is true, and yet all the sages tell us keep going until you realize that it's not necessary. Ramakrishna tells the story of that seagull, on the mast of the ship. Then the ship takes off from the shore, and the seagull wakes up and realizes, oh my God. And he flies off to the north to try and find his way back home. Can't find it, turns around, goes back to the ship. He flies off in all 4 directions before he finally settles and makes a nest in the mast of the ship and realizes that he's always been home. But he had to fly off as far as he could in all 4 directions before he could find it in himself to make his home where he was. And so that is at least part and parcel of what our practice is. It's us learning that we can't do it ourselves. It's us learning that we have to try it to understand that it's not a thing, that it's something beyond all of that. But we can't believe it until we've exhausted ourselves trying. So, that. Without causing the objective universe to vanish, and without knowing the truth of the self, how is one to achieve liberation by the mere utterance of the word Brahman? It would result merely in an effort of speech. Without killing one's enemies and possessing oneself of the splendor of the entire surrounding region, One cannot claim to be emperor by merely saying, I am an emperor. More of the same. More of the same.
I have a question.
Yes.
48 years ago, I had love for Thakur and Maharaj, especially Shardana. So I didn't meditate or anything, but my mind was, like that. So one day that Upanishad, I think, funny I heard that story because I didn't know that I don't have to tell. I'm not telling that things, what happened to me. But I had that Upanishad, whatever the Swami Chidbrahmananda was describing, I had that experience. But I was not eager to have that experience or anything, but I had that experience. Again, another Upanishad, the Tattvayananda explained, that also I had that experience. So now my mind was not eager about all those things, but I had that experience. But now I'm so eager to realize, but I am not achieving that. So, and then another thing.
You've answered your own question though, Lori.
Huh?
You've answered your own question.
What?
What did those experiences 48 years ago give to you?
Yeah,
An eagerness that you didn't have 48 years ago?
no. So I don't have to be eager or anything.
No,
So
but-
automatically it will come to
No,
me.
you should be eager.
The point is that mother does that quite a bit. That's not an uncommon experience, that in the beginning, mother will give you a little piece of sugar,
Yeah.
and then she'll withhold it.
Yeah.
And she'll withhold it. She'll do it for a couple of reasons. And of course, here I am about to tell you about the mind of mother. May she forgive me. But one feeble response to that is one, by giving you that 48 years ago, she has really given you the eagerness for more now, which will take you on the journey. If she had not given you anything 48 years ago, 48 years later, you would still not have any
That time I
eagerness.
didn't realize that.
Yes.
But now I'm realizing.
Yes, mother's gift gives for the rest of your life. And that eagerness and that hunger and that taste for more, she's waking you up, letting you know that it exists, letting you know that it's real, letting you know that it is the only thing that's real, and then letting you go forward. But she withholds it because it can't become the purpose of your spiritual life. She's not an object to be purchased, she's not an experience to be bought, but she wants you to know that she's there and that it's that this is worthwhile. So prepare your room. That's all, and wait for her. Prepare your room and wait for her. The seeking, we talk about this quite a few times, that if you sit down one day and have a great meditation, it's really deep, and maybe you see this, that, or the other, it's just blissful, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And the next day you sit down, and the first thing you want to do is have that experience again, so you go looking for that experience. As soon as you go looking for anything in your meditation, it's ruined. Meditation is an isness. One Swami says it this way, he says, the reason that the fulfillment of a desire is so pleasurable is not because the desire gave you anything, but because for that brief moment that your desire has been fulfilled, you are without desire, and in that crack, the bliss of the self shines through, before the next desire covers it up again. So that the pleasure of this world is just that. It's you doing something that you think is giving you pleasure, but all you're doing is stopping your desire for a moment as soon as that pleasure is fulfilled, or that desire is fulfilled, and the bliss of the self breaks through for a moment. So to know that whatever mother showed you, she doesn't have to give you again. It is you. It is your nature. Don't desire it. What is the point in desiring a stereo you already have? What's the point of wanting pizza when it's in front of you? Eat the pizza. You know? So when you sit down and meditate, don't go looking for Mother. Be with Mother. You know, when you sit down to enjoy Mother's bliss, don't go looking for her bliss. Enjoy her bliss. Let everything else shut down. Be quiet. Let the desire stop. Let the searching stop. Vivekananda says that. Stop seeking God, he says. Stop it. See God. That's all you've ever seen. That's all you've ever experienced. So let everything else stop, and those things which seemed like they were given to you because you were ignorant at the time and not wanting them, not seeking for them, not searching, not eager for them. Now you are eager for them. Do your practice. Do your practice to enjoy them, not to receive them. Let them be their own thing. She didn't do it for no reason. For sure. Yeah. No, I over by the years I've come to see that. I've had quite a few people tell me that. And I can say in my first year or two in the monastery, I had some of the best meditations then. I mean, a long time, long time before. It just seemed so dry sometimes. 6, 7, 8, 9 years. You're just like, what am I doing? There's nothing here. That's Mother purifying you. By continuing to go, knowing there's nothing there, that you're not necessarily getting anything for it, but doing it for its own sake, doing it for any other reason than getting a penny's worth of enjoyment from it, purifies you each time you do it and don't get what you were looking for. You're purified just a little bit more, until at some point you realize that you do it for its own sake. Do it for its own sake. And then you come to realize you don't just do that for its own sake, you do everything for its own sake. And you discover that God is in that moment and reveals himself when something is truly done for its own sake. And Vivekananda says that strive your whole life to do one unselfish deed. Make that the point of your whole life. The moment you are able to do one deed in a perfectly unselfish way, realization will be yours. Because that's the only way to do an unselfish deed, is to realize your oneness in all things. So just strive your whole life, make your whole life the practice of doing one perfectly unselfish deed. Whether it's meditating or cooking food for somebody, filling out your DMV form, or giving $1 to the guy on the street. Learn
You
that
are
one.
doing unselfishness every Saturday, Sunday, making soup for us.
Yeah, if it was true, I'd be realized. Unfortunately, I sit and eat my own soup. So. We're all on this quest together. That's the thing.
Swamiji, many times I see some young people on the crossroad, they put a sign, say, give hug, now hug is free, no hug is $1. And come and then ask for it, young guys. So I am not justifying, but do you think that giving $1 will free them from all this bondage of slavery, or or like make them happy, or make them independent? Or if you give them more, you are making them more to succumb to that kind of profession that I am getting, why to work? I am getting something by which I can pull on my life. So what should we do? Should we give them to help them, or not giving them so that they will have to stand on their own feet?
Yes. Both answers are in the scriptures. Ramakrishna gives both examples. He says one place that just by the mere asking for money, somebody needs money, that it's not yours to judge them. And then he also says, be wise about who you give money to. Now, there's not a solution to that, because there's no way you will ever know the mind of the person that you're giving to, or ever be able to suss out the exact
Exactly.
situation
We
that you're
don't
giving
know
to.
their past,
Past,
Yeah.
That's right,
why they need it,
yeah.
what is their
And
situation.
you never will. So either you're going to become the most selfish person and never give anything to anybody out of fear of violating any one of those other things, or you're going to become a completely unselfish person who's willing to take on whatever you cause as your own karma. Now, the solution, and this is working it out in my own life and the scriptures too, I take a prayer and give. If I feel a compulsion to give. Sometimes immediately you don't feel the compulsion. You know, sometimes it's like, I go with the compulsion, but if it's to give, I always say it with a prayer. And there's Vivekananda gives a lot of insight around this kind of thing. He says, number one, understand that you can't help anybody in this world. Who are you to help anybody? You're just as ignorant as the next person.
Yeah, you are helping yourself.
Yeah, yeah. We only help ourselves in the end. He says every opportunity to give is an opportunity to worship, not an opportunity to help. You know, because any action done to help somebody else will always end unhappily. Why? Because your notion that you're the helper is feeding your ego, which is increasing your bondage. And you seeing them as the person needing to help enslaves them and indebts them to you, which will make them resentful and make them hate you, ultimately. So he says, so you first of all try and frame that, understand that in giving this dollar, you're doing nothing for anybody. You're doing something for yourself. Sri Nisargadatta gives a great insight to this. He says when a bound person sees a sufferer, he sees a sufferer. He sees someone suffering. He says, when I see suffering, I suffer. Because a person who is bound looks from the outside in, sees a body who is suffering. But a realized person looks from the inside out and realizes that it's he himself who is suffering. So that's how you know that you're helping yourself only. That woman, that man or that woman sitting there in need is you. The differences are only in appearance. That Atman within is one. That pure self is one. It is you sitting there in another form, just like in your dream. In your dream, everybody in that dream is you. Give to the person in your dream understanding that you both are the dreamer. And that it's all a story. You know? But make it a beautiful story of you helping you. You loving you. You being free, not bound. So turn that into an act of worship. Take it as an opportunity to worship, to offer a flower. In the same way that you go and put a flower on the shrine, you're not helping Mother. Mother's got every flower in the world. She created the flower. She doesn't care at all about the flower. But there's still something beautiful about offering the flower on the shrine. It's that same story I tell about my dad when I was like 10 years old. I remember going to the store with my mother, actually, to buy my dad. She gave me $10 to buy my dad a Father's Day gift. I was 10 years old. I was starting to think about things. And as I was walking around the store looking to buy something for my dad, I was like, this is his $10 anyway. Why can't he just come down here and buy what he wants for $10? You know, I'm using his money to buy him a gift. You know? And I had to think. I don't know that I came up with the answer or not, but here 50 years later I can look at it and understand that there's something special. Even though my dad knew that he paid for the gift, there was still something special because it was me giving him that gift. And I had chosen it and picked it out. And my little Snoopy statue that said, "Think Snow" on it was probably something he never would have thought of buying for himself. You know? And so it's like that, you know? So put these things in that context and be a servant. Understand the joy of the fact that that person there is you. And there's nothing that you can give yourself that has any meaning at all. And yet find it beautiful that you gave yourself something.
It's still